Garmaigat Cancorla, and can I begin by welcoming the Palestinian national women's soccer team to Ireland and to commend the Bohemians Club for hosting the squad for their match this evening. Minister, what does it say about your party's record after 13 years in government that families are forced to go onto the media to beg for the services that their children with disabilities are legally entitled to? Recently, another desperate mother had to go public to report that her little boy has missed out on starting school later this year because he hasn't received his assessment of needs. In fact, the HSE have confirmed that there are almost 10,000 children awaiting assessment of needs that your government is obliged to provide within 3 months. All over the state, there are little boys and little girls who need help and services. Their parents know this, their childcare providers or teachers know this, very often their young siblings know this, but they cannot access that help or the services they need. Many cannot access appropriate school places or special protection supports without an assessment. They cannot get access to services with or without an assessment because of intolerable waiting lists. Minister, can you imagine the frustration, the pain, the anger of a mother or father who knows that their child's life can improve drastically if only they could get access to an occupational therapist or to speech and language therapy or a place in the right class in the right school, but find that your government's failures is preventing them from getting a fair chance of accessing those things? Minister, an assessment of needs identifies whether a person has a disability, any health and educational needs that arise from that disability, as well as what services are required to meet those needs. Your government has a legal obligation to provide these under the Disability Act. But through to Fine Gael form, your government had been trying to shortcut the assessment process and were called out by the High Court. You are now overseeing record waiting lists for assessments, and 8,000 of the children are waiting over the 3 months. Some parents have gone to the expense of getting assessments carried out privately, but the HSE will not accept them, while of course many families do not have even the wherewithal to even consider that option. And for those who do receive an assessment of needs, very often they find that their battle has just begun. Waiting lists for OTs, for speech and language and other services are disgracefully long. Many find that the special education requirements of their child cannot be met because your government continues to play catch-up rather than plan for the educational needs of children that you know are coming into the system. And the problem is, of course, worst in our own county of Monaghan. That is just one of 2 counties that doesn't have a special school, despite the need being identified many years ago. So, Minister, can I ask, what do you say to the mother today who is looking at her little boy that does not have a school place next September? What do you say to those parents who are wondering when their child will receive the diagnosis that they need for educational and health supports? What do you say to those who have been assessed, who know what their child's needs are, but who are being told that those needs will not be met? And after 13 years in government, what assurance can you give to those families who have had to fight your government every single day of their child's life just to get the services that will allow those children to have the start that every parent would want for their son or daughter?
Gurmaigut Cancorla, and I just want to thank the Deputy for raising this issue, and I know that it's one both you and I are committed to seeing progress on. We all have the experience in representing our constituents of meeting parents, and both of us have done that, who are waiting too long for the assessment of their children's needs, and unfortunately then for the therapies they also need. We must do all we can to relieve the pressure on these families and on frontline staff. You will know that the Taoiseach established a new Cabinet Committee on Children, Education and Disability, which includes all responsible ministers and departments. This committee has already met on a number of occasions, and the issue of disability has been front and centre. And I know at the most recent meeting there was a focus on the waiting list for assessment of need and how we can increase the use of the private sector to deliver results for families waiting long periods. Private assessments are already taking place, with 16.5 million already set aside for the HSE to procure diagnostic ASD assessments through the private sector. We are examining what more we can do, Deputy. That work is very much being led by the Taoiseach, and who is working extremely closely with Minister Anne Rabbitte and Minister Stephen Donnelly. And I just want to say about Minister Rabbitte, she came to our own constituency, she came up to Monaghan, she met the people first hand, she spoke to them, and there's no better person to advocate and to work extremely hard for the rights of people with special needs and with disabilities. And I'm pleased to tell you today, Deputy, that Minister Rabbitte, along with the Taoiseach and Minister Donnelly, is spearheading a new long waiting lists initiative. That will be announced very shortly, and that's going to be underpinned by both investment and, importantly, a real sense of urgency to address this issue. You mentioned also children with special educational needs. To receive a high quality education is also a priority for this government. Over a quarter of the entire education budget is dedicated to special education, and Minister Hildegard Naughton, who sits at the Cabinet table, takes responsibility for this portfolio. In that capacity, she is determined to be a voice for special education and inclusion at the highest level of government. The new Cabinet Committee on Children, Education and Disability includes all responsible ministers and departments, and I know that Minister Naughton is reviewing the need for special schools across the country, and that's something she's working on along with Minister Foley. And absolutely, Deputy, I do know, like you know, the need for a new special needs school in Monaghan. We have a very, very fine upgraded facility in Cootehill in County Cavan, the Holy Family School, that recently got a multi-million euro investment. It's state of the art, but unfortunately there's a waiting list there, and there's more and more children that require this service, and this government is committed to providing the services that we need to make sure that our children get priority.
Thank you, Minister Humphreys. Deputy.
See, Minister, all of that would count for something if this problem had just emerged in the past number of weeks or number of months. This problem has been getting steadily worse under this government, and for all the task force and all the reviews that you propose, there are immediate solutions that need to be implemented now. David Cullinan has told your government what they are. Pauline Tully has told your government what they are. Other members of the opposition have told your government what they are. Most importantly, the families of the children involved and the professionals directly involved in providing these services have told your government what the solutions are. You need to end the recruitment embargo on HSE primary care services. You need to fully resource and staff children's disability teams. You need to end the disparity between HSE and Section 39 disability providers. You need to plan special education places. We don't need a review. We don't need an assessment to tell us that County Monaghan and County Leitrim, the two counties without special schools, need them. We need the plan in place to deliver it as a matter of urgency. And we need to implement a comprehensive workforce plan to sustainably staff the health services and end the excruciating waiting list. Minister, I asked you, what will you say to those families today who are in dire circumstances because their children are being denied the services that they need right now? I think they deserve an answer to those very important questions.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Yeah. Look, Deputy, you know, I know the parent you're talking about. I've spoken to that lady too. And I know the difficulties she faces. I know she's tried about 4 different schools and she's having difficulties. I know that, and we're doing all we can to support her. You know, and we do need to explore greater use of the private sector when it comes to the assessment of needs. We also need to grow the teams within the HSE, which are providing much needed therapies, and increase training places within our third level sector so that we improve services, increase capacity and reduce wait lists. In this regard, the Progressing Disability Services Roadmap 23 to 26 was launched last October. It focuses on the ongoing development of children's disability network teams and services to meet current and growing demand. We are investing greatly into CDNTs, with funding equating to almost 800 whole-time equivalent posts, including around 175 therapy assistant posts approved in this year's budget. And can I just say there was no derogation, or there was no embargo on recruiting children, on recruiting people who could carry out assessment of needs for children. There was a derogation on that in terms of staffing. So there was total. All the resources that we could find and put into that has been put into it. So there has been a lot done in that area, and I agree that we have to do more.
Now, the Leader of the Labour Party, Deputy Ivana Bacik, please.
Minister Humphreys, today on Nakba Day, we stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza and of Palestine. Amid the horror of Netanyahu's genocidal siege on Gaza, the compassionate response of people here in Ireland has been really notable. We see people here standing up for human rights, humanitarianism and international law. We've seen it in recent weeks in the incredible activism of students in Trinity and across other campuses. We've seen it this week in the generosity of spirit shown by Bows Football Club, the women's team and supporters and others towards the Palestinian women's football team who are here. And I saw it last week on a visit to Ratoath in County Meath, when 7-year-old Minnie McDermott handed me a handwritten letter she asked me to pass on to the Taoiseach, asking him to take stronger action to ban trade with Israel. She was so distressed, as so many children across Ireland are, to know about the treatment of boys and girls her age in Gaza, being killed, being under siege, facing famine. Minister Humphreys, across the island, communities are showing solidarity with the beleaguered people of Gaza. And this is what makes the continuation of Irish trade with companies in the occupied territories all the more perverse. There have been positive moves from your government, and I do appreciate, as we all do, the government's movement towards recognition of the Palestinian state. That's very welcome. We've been proud of Ireland's steadfast support for an immediate ceasefire to bring an end to the horrendous killing in Gaza and a return of all hostages. Yet those actions are undermined so long as Ireland remains so financially embedded in Israel's economy. And while trade ties remain with Israel, we are indirectly funding all that we find so abhorrent. The incursion into Rafah, the destruction of aid at the border, the killing of children, of medics, of aid workers by the Israeli Defence Forces. Brutal scenes this week alone. In 2023, Minister, Ireland imported €3.6 billion worth of Israeli goods. In the first 2 months of this year alone, €608 million worth of Israeli goods came into the state, and Ireland remains a top 10 importer of goods from Israel. Minister, I think this statistic must appall all those who are calling for action, all those taking steps in their own lives to stand against war. And while we continue to wait for that delayed review of the EU-Israel Association Agreement at EU level, we need to see action now from the Irish Government. Minister, we must urgently see passage of Senator Francis Black's Occupied Territories Bill, and the repeated dismissal by government of opposition proposals to sanction Israel are really frustrating. We hear that you cannot legislate to bring about trade bans, but Minister, the treaties governing EU trade make clear that exceptions can be made where bilateral trade is contrary to public policy or public morals. And as our Labour colleague Niamh Harrigan put it, famine hovers over the people of Gaza as a horrific spectre, but companies continue to export at leisure. So Minister, do you not agree that now is the time to pass the Occupied Territories Bill and introduce meaningful sanctions, meaningful trade sanctions on Israel now?
Mr Humphreys.
And thank you, Deputy, for raising this. Just to say that the Taoiseach has confirmed this morning that Ireland will recognise the state of Palestine by the end of this month. And just to say that we are urgently calling for an immediate and sustainable humanitarian ceasefire, the unconditional release of all hostages and full, safe and unhindered humanitarian access. The protection of civilians must be paramount. It is an obligation under international humanitarian law. Accountability for civilian deaths is essential. Ireland calls for de-escalation by all actors in the region, and regional de-escalation and the protection of civilians and aid workers must remain the priority. We need an immediate and durable ceasefire now, and sustained and unhindered humanitarian access to civilian population is essential, and all hostages must be released. Can I say that Ireland is not financially embedded? There was a small investment by ISAF, and that has been divested. In terms of the Occupied Territories Bill, can I just say the government's position is that the bill would not be compatible with the EU law and would therefore not be implementable. This is the clear legal advice on this matter. The government will therefore not be taking it forward. Ireland's opposition to illegal Israeli settlements is unambiguous and is grounded in international law. To adopt a unilateral approach that runs contrary to legal advice would undermine Ireland's stance on this issue and on our broader advocacy on compliance with international law. And can I just say, we have worked very hard with the relevant authorities in Gaza to facilitate the exit of Irish citizens and immediate dependents who have expressed a wish to leave, and the Department has been able to assist over 100 Irish citizens and dependents to leave. This is a difficult, very, very difficult situation, and what we see on the television is just heart-wrenching stuff. It really is. But we have been very clear in calling for a humanitarian ceasefire. And just to finish off, can I too just commend Bohemians Football Club, like Deputy Carthy did, and yourself, just to say that commend them for entertaining and for bringing over the Palestinian women's team, and I wish them well, and just to thank Bohemians for doing that. I think it was the right thing to do.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Thatcher.
Well, thanks, Minister, and I think we all acknowledge and warmly welcome Bohemians Football Club's actions and hospitality to the Palestinian team. And I have welcomed the moves towards a Palestinian state, the Taoiseach's comments today, and indeed the support for ceasefire. But we do need to see more meaningful steps taken on trade. You've said that the government opposition to the Occupied Territories Bill is based on legal advice, presumably from the Attorney-General. But I want to know, when was that advice given? And why has it not changed since the war began and since we've seen the escalation? And we're seeing further escalation even this week alone that is leading US government policy to change. Article 24 of the EU regulation on imports from non-member states allows for bans on the import of goods on the grounds of public morality, public policy or protection of health and human life. Same exception applies under Article 36 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union regarding goods in circulation within the EU. I cannot see how a ban on the importation of goods does not fall under these grounds. So can I ask, will you ask the Attorney-General again to update advice in light of the continuing escalation of genocidal actions, of killings, of besiegement, of the looming famine, of the looming ground invasion of Rafah that we're all so fearful is going to escalate matters to an even more unthinkable degree of horror for the people of Gaza? Why can we not see an updated advice from the Attorney-General that takes these matters into account in considering the government approach to the ban, to this Occupied Territories Bill?
Minister, please.
Thank you. Can I just condemn the incursions into Rafah? These people have nowhere to go. It's something that I know we all condemn in this House, and it's wrong that people are left in that awful situation. In terms, I've been very clear on the issue of the Occupied Territories Bill, and something that we have taken legal advice on, and it's something that we have taken legal advice on, and Ireland's opposition to the illegal Israeli settlements, it's unambiguous, it's grounded in international law, as I've said. You've asked, will we look at it again? These things are always kept under review, but I can't see that the advice is going to change. But nevertheless, I take on board what you're saying.
Thank you very much. We move to the third question, which is from Deputy Michael Lowry on behalf of the Regional Group.
Minister, I also wish to raise with you the special needs issue. Raising a child with special needs is both challenging and rewarding. It is demanding yet fulfilling. For parents, it becomes a labour of love in almost every possible sense. They want what is best for their son or daughter. They want their child to have the best possible start in life. They plan for the years ahead when their child may no longer have their care and support. They aim to set the best foundation to support their child throughout their life. I attended an Action for Autism rally in Tipperary earlier this month. This event was organised by two mothers who have reached the limit of their endurance. They and most of those who joined them have battled for years for services for children. Seeing parents of children with special needs marching through the streets to fight for their children's needs is a heartbreaking sight. They have come to believe, with good reason, that seeking what their children urgently need through the established channels is a fruitless exercise. Today I received a letter signed by all of the teachers in Schullcormac and Cashel. It sets out a catalogue of neglect. The school community there is suffering because of lack of resources and lack of services. For as long as most people in this House can remember, there have been calls to regulate, reform and resource all areas of the special needs sector. There have been some improvements which are acknowledged and appreciated. However, the reality is that they merely touch the edges of an issue that is impacting the most vulnerable members of our society. Parents' demands for their special children are no more than any child in the country deserves. They are pleading for timely assessment for their children. This is the first hurdle on their journey for their child. That is what will guide future decisions. The reality is that this is the hardest hurdle to cross. The most recent figures available show that there are almost 7,000 children across the country waiting for such assessments. The outcome is crucial. It will establish if they need disability, health or educational support. It will determine the road ahead. While they wait to be called for these assessments, the lives of the family and most especially the child are left in limbo. Their next hurdle is finding a suitable place in the educational system and proper SNA support. This can be soul-destroying for the parents who face many closed doors before they hopefully find one that will open to them. All the while, Minister, the lives of these children are on hold. And I have to say that it is a sad reflection on government and all of us here as members of this House that as a country and as human beings we are continuing to let down these children and their families. This is a legacy and current issue that should unite this Dáil in meaningful action. You referred to the Taoiseach taking initiatives. Could you please update us on relation to what progress has been made on those initiatives and when can we expect to see results?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, and thank you, Deputy Lowry, for raising this issue. And I know that this is something that you feel very strongly about. And I know that you have advocated for Schullcormac in Cashel. Look, I spoke about this earlier. We all have the experience in representing our constituents of meeting parents who are waiting too long for the assessment of their children's needs, and then also for the therapies that they need. And we have to do all we can to relieve the pressure. The Taoiseach has established the new Cabinet Committee on Children, Education and Disability, and that includes the responsible ministers and departments. The committee has already met on a number of occasions, and the issue of disability has been front and centre. And I know at the most recent meeting there was a focus on the waiting list for assessment of need and how we can increase the use of the private sector to deliver results for families waiting long periods. Private assessments are already taking place, with 16.5 million has already been set aside for the HSE to procure diagnostic ASD assessments through the private sector, and this work is being led by the Taoiseach, working closely with Minister Anne Rabbitte and Minister Stephen Donnelly, and I have to say that Minister Rabbitte works day and night in terms of this area and how she can do more to support, and she does hold her officials to account, I can assure you, because I've seen it firsthand. In terms of special education needs, that's also an issue that Minister Hildegard Naughton, who sits at the Cabinet table, totally committed to, along with Minister Foley, to providing more spaces for children with special needs. There's 7 special schools and 2/3 of all special classes have been established by this government. We'll open more special schools this year, and capacity in special schools around the country will also be increased, as has happened in recent years. A significant number of new special classes, 400, have already been sanctioned for September of those arrangements, and 300 has already been sanctioned for September. Of those arrangements having been finalised for approximately 300, with the remainder being identified in the coming weeks. But that's not to say that, as this work continues, that we don't have huge sympathy with a family looking to secure a special education place. And I'm aware of that, and I know how difficult it is for families. And sometimes the special education places in mainstream education, it does not meet the needs of the child involved. They may need to go to a special school specifically for that purpose, and we are committed to improving those services. So I just want to thank you for raising it.
Minister, Deputy Lowry.
When we had COVID, the health service came together and we used the private sector to very good effect. In this case here, we had the big problem is with assessment. And we do not have enough of psychologists, child psychologists in the public sector. They are in the private sector. We should make a once-off effort to get them to combine and do whatever is necessary to reduce the backlog that is there. There are people, young children, waiting for 2 and 3 years for an assessment, and it's simply unjust and unfair and needs to be dealt with. Also, Minister, there are 100 special schools across Ireland. And the reality is that number is failing to meet demand. Similarly, many special need classes in national schools are also struggling to cater for those who need a place. And in terms of providing appropriate education, the special school and special needs classrooms model has proven to be successful. Special needs children get lost in mainstream schools. There is neither the time or the opportunity to nurture their abilities. So I would say, finally, Minister, there is a need for increased access to specialised services offered through special needs education. That is what parents are demanding. That is what they know is required and what their children need and deserve.
Thank you. And just to say, in 2021 we did clear the list. And there is a framework in place there, and there's 16.5 million available to procure the services for special needs assessment in the private sector. So we do need to clear the list. You're absolutely right there, and we will do it, and the funding has been provided. In terms of the special needs schools, there's 7 have been established over recent years in a number of areas, whether it's Cork and Dublin, but for 2024-2025 school year, the focus is on areas outside of the larger cities. There's schools opening in Meath, Kildare, Wexford and Limerick, and I know there's 2 counties. Well, I know my own county of Monaghan doesn't have a special needs school, and Deputy mentioned earlier that there's not one in Leitrim. So these are the areas we have to look at as well, where we need to have more special needs schools. Capacity in the special schools around the country will also be increased, as has happened in recent years. The Department of Education and the NCSE work closely on the forward planning of special school provision, and since 2020 a total of 55 building projects have been completed across 41 special schools, and during 2022 and 2023 alone the school building programme provided accommodation for 80 additional or modernised classrooms in special schools, and we've all seen them in our own constituency. They are state-of-the-art, they are providing a great service, but I think that there are many cases where it's not suitable for the children. Maybe they need to be in a special school, and I accept that, and it's what's best for the children, and that's what we're focused on.
Please.
We welcome some members of the families of the 27 Dublin victims and the 7 who lost their lives in Monaghan, along with the representatives of the Justice for the Forgotten, yesterday for Sinn Féin's motion on the 50th anniversary of the Dublin-Monaghan bombings. I welcomed that motion, and the families welcomed that the government were supporting that motion. But one thing the motion has failed to address is the fact that the families of the victims of those 2 horrific acts have never had the Garda files released to them or their legal teams. It does refer to the material from the Operation Denton, but a number of TDs raised issues yesterday. The Garda investigation was now famously inadequate. The State's response was callous and uncaring. The investigation was closed after 10 weeks. Files related to the investigation were lost or destroyed. The Barron Commission criticised the investigation for ending too soon. The forensic evidence was mishandled. Evidence and files that should have been sent north after 24 hours were not sent for 11 days. It then went missing. Garda forensic technical expert James Donovan, who was sent some material to test by the Gardaí, was not made aware that material went north for 25 years. The forensics team in Dublin did not work in cooperation with their counterparts in Belfast. Not one survivor of the bereaved family member was interviewed by the Irish police in Dublin or Monaghan after the atrocity to date. After 50 years, not one policeman knocked on their doors. John Boucher, who initially headed up Operation Denton, was the first policeman to knock on people's doors as part of his report. Bertie O'Hare, when he was Taoiseach, said that nothing in the files that would have suggested or indicated who was responsible. If the files are so clean of evidence, why haven't they been released to the families? And they should be released now. There have been 29 ministers for justice since the atrocity. None have been willing to release Garda files to the family's legal team. 2 ministers, Nora Owen and Mary Gagan-Quinn, told the families at the meetings to go and find your information, and if you find something, come back to us. The investigative material represented to the McEntee report has been blocked to the family's legal team by government using the Commission of Information Act 2004. This will stop family members and legal teams from seeing this material for 50 years, Minister. We are calling, and I'm calling you, and the families are calling you to release these materials immediately to the family and their legal team. This was an investigation mishandled by the Gardaí. The aftermath and the grief of the victims and their families was mishandled by the state. Your Taoiseach acknowledged that last night. The families want to see the investigation files. They still haven't been allowed to see them. They will have to wait decades before the Commission of Information Act 2004 no longer applies. Will your government commit to releasing the Garda files and the investigation materials to the victims, their families and their legal teams immediately? Get your own house in order, and then I think we can go to the British state and ask them to get their house in order.
Thank you, Deputy Collins. Minister.
Thank you, Deputy, for raising this. And of course, we commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Dublin-Monaghan bombings at the end of this week on Friday. The legacy of that atrocity lives on in the memory of many. I know that from my own town of Monaghan. And the people that it impacted on, the people who lost their lives that day. I know the bomb in Monaghan went off outside what they called Greason's pub. There was children came home to their parents, but they were taken. I was just reading the story. There was 2 children actually in a hall, and their father had dropped them in. He had went into Greason's, obviously went in there and was waiting there. The bomb went off. The children were brought home in the panic. And then the news came later that their father had been killed. Well, he had been badly injured in the bomb. And as I say, it's 50 years ago, but the legacy lives on. Can I just say that this government has supported all-party Dáil motions. There's been agreement right across the House here in terms of motions in relation to the Dublin and Monaghan bombings. It continues to be a priority for this government, and the Taoiseach and the Minister of Foreign Affairs has consistently raised the previous motions with the British government, most recently with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland on the 18th and the 29th of April, and will continue to do so. Look, it was something that we discussed yesterday at Cabinet. It's something that, as I said, there's agreement on right across the House here. Regarding the Garda files, I can't give you a commitment on that, but I do give you a commitment that I will raise it with the relevant minister and with the Taoiseach, and to see if any further progress can be made. Thanks.
Minister. Deputy Collins.
Last night, the Taoiseach said, today we mourn the families, the great loss suffered by the victims of the bombs of 17th of May 74. We offer our humble acknowledgement of the obstacles that they've had to overcome and maintain they have climbed to get their campaign to where it is today. We recognise our own past shortcomings as a state and political system, and I think we have to recognise that on this commemoration, 50 years. We have to recognise that. And I think the families more than anything would welcome the government now stepping in and releasing those files, the Garda files. I know you said you raise it, but they should be released. It should be announced as soon as possible. And also the information that the Commissioner of Information Act has on their files. They should be released immediately to the families. And a line of communication, like the line of communication that's been set up with the Stardust family, should be linked in with these families now, so that their legal teams and the families can start asking the government for what they need to get justice and truth in relation to this. And that's what they want more than anything.
Yeah, like you, Deputy, I have engaged with the families of that terrible atrocity, and I know some of them extremely well. It has been a long journey, difficult time for them, and I think, in fairness, as the Taoiseach has said, we need to look once again and try and get access to those files, and I take on board what you say.